yeah, as I've sat and explored myself and my brain and my mind in therapy, I've realized that some of the things that you think will affect you the most might not. They might stay in that world. And then there's all these other things that affect you way more than you would ever think they even have the right. So I wouldn't know, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be able to say to you, oh, I'm like this because of that, or I'm like that because of that. No, I do think I appreciate people more. You know, I'm very present when I'm with my loved ones. Um, yeah, but other than that, I couldn't give you a concrete answer that would be genuine.
You said something about young men struggling, which is came to mind as you're talking about you being that young man who seemed to be quite confused with a variety of emotions and um, less experienced about what the correct outlets were for those emotions. You said recently, in fact, one of the big things I've been worried about recently is young men and how angry they've become, how alone they've become, how isolated they've become, and then ironically, how they've turned anger, isolation into a community. There's a couple of words there that seem to fit the shoe that would go on your foot: anger, isolation, um, as a young man, loneliness. Can you relate to what young men are going through in the sort of modern world today? Because the stats on young men are quite shocking.
Yeah.
The mental health stats, the suicidality stats, the depression stats, the stats around purposelessness. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know how you're looking at young men today. I get asked all the time by people that listen to the show. They say they've got a young son and the son is struggling. They don't know who they are, where they belong, what their purpose is. How to make friends is a big one. What are you seeing when you look out into the world, the state of young men?
So I think I can empathize with a lot of it, and I think I can relate to some of it. But on my side, you know, other than the anger, let's say, I wasn't isolated. I didn't feel isolated at all. Because I got to play with other kids, and because I was with other kids, and because I had my cousins and everybody, I never felt isolated. You know, so even when I was talking to you about my grandmother, I think you used isolated, but I didn't, because I genuinely never perceived it as that. Because I was in the home with people. It's just they were grannies. So do you get what I'm saying? So I didn't feel like isolated in that way. Definitely felt like an outsider though, which is a different feeling that's adjacent. I think it occupies the same lexical field, but it isn't the exact same thing. You know, because isolation, I think, can come with it like a certain solitude and a certain, you know, a feeling of like knowing that you are in this thing alone because you are in this thing alone. But then being an outsider is a different, you know, it's a different type of torture. And I think that's maybe what a lot of men are experiencing that I can relate to. I think for a long time, we've lived in a world where we've told people what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, and it was sort of easily realized, right? And now I'm not a historian. I don't know every you know history that we've gone through, but from the little that I've read and from the historians that I have spoken to, you know, society goes in these waves, and we move through these waves. And I think we shouldn't take for granted now that there was a whole generation of young men who were given a purpose by war, a lot of war. And war is one of the most powerful thrusts of purpose that a nation will ever experience. Young men are told what they're supposed to be doing. Your country needs you. You need to go and fight, young man. You need to protect this country. And you're like, I need to protect this country. Now, even if you don't want to dodge the draft, you've been given a purpose in a strange way. Even if you're like, I'm anti-war, now you have a purpose. Your purpose is to be against the war. Your purpose is to oppose the war. Your purpose is to spread love and peace. The other person's purpose is to survive the war. Another person's purpose is to win at the war. But you have a purpose. And that purpose is powerful, and it propels nations forward, you know?
Individuals.
And then you enter into a period of what we would argue is relative peace. And I say relative because there are many parts of the world where there's just like these constant chronic wars that are waging. But for most people, what are you doing? You know, sitting in a world where there is no draft and there is no imminent war. And it's a choice now. Do you want to go to the military or do you not? And you don't have to. And then also, things aren't just given to you. You know, before when your parents were like, go get a job, it meant there was a job to get. You know, if your parents were like, go get a job, you could. It was almost harder to not get a job back in the day than it is now in a strange way, because like it was just like this thing you do. You know, it was doing. I sweep, I clean, I collect, I fix. It was so simple. And I think now we're living in a world where many young men are are, are experiencing a purposelessness because it's sort of like not laid out in any way, shape, or form. And I think we've created such a narrow scope of what people can do or can't do, or like we've rewarded so few things that I think we've exacerbated the problem. You know, gone are the times when being a painter, a philosopher, some sort of artisan is like celebrated in that way. Gone are the days where skills are passed down from generation to generation, and it seems like that's less and less becoming a thing. And from what I've been told, a lot of it can be tracked back to like industrialization and this consolidation of
Exactly.
manufacturing. So
An interesting point of this as you were talking is because more women are graduating with college degrees
mhm.
and